Vera Prime looked less like a planet and more like a jewelry box smashed open against the velvet dark of space. The capital world of the Unified Council did not believe in night. It believed in neon, in luminous transit veins that pulsed like arteries through the sky, and in the relentless, blinding gold of authority. Floating districts hovered above the clouds, tethered by gravity locks that hummed with a sound almost too low for the human ear to hear. Holographic banners the size of skyscrapers draped over the architecture, projecting the smiling, benevolent faces of the counselors. They promised safety. They promised order. They promised that the future was bright, provided one did not ask too many questions about the past. At the center of this floating opulence sat the Astra Lyceum. It was a sprawling campus of white stone and glass that curved in impossible geometries, a place where the laws of physics bowed politely to the laws of wealth. This was where the galaxy sent its golden children, the sons of warlords, the daughters of oligarchs, and the heirs to planetary systems studied here under the impenetrable shield of diplomatic immunity. A transport shuttle docked at the faculty pier with a pneumatic hiss. The doors slid open, and Ms. Mara Quinn stepped out. She looked entirely unremarkable. Her uniform was a standard-issue beige, crisp and perfectly fitted, but boring enough to slide off the eye. She held a stack of physical paperwork in her arm, an archaic affectation that suggested she was a bureaucrat, a woman of rules and ledgers. She adjusted her glasses. She smoothed her skirt. She looked like a woman who would apologize if someone stepped on her foot. But if anyone had looked closer, they might have noticed that her eyes did not move like a teacher's eyes. They did not wander. They snapped from point to point, cataloging exits, calculating the tensile strength of the railing, and assessing the blast radius of the fuel cells on the docked ships. Her breathing was a rhythmic, controlled tide, slower than a normal human resting heart rate. She walked with a gait that made no sound against the polished floor tiles. Mara Quinn was a fiction. She was a ghost story wrapped in skin and paperwork. A drone hovered over to her, scanning her retina with a red beam. Identity confirmed. The machine chirped in a synthetic voice, "Welcome to Astra Lyceum. Mrs. Quinn, the administrator is waiting." The tour of the facility was conducted by Administrator Halloway, a nervous man who sweated through his silk tunic despite the climate control. He walked fast, talking over his shoulder, clearly eager to deposit this new human hire in her quarters and wash his hands of her. "We pride ourselves on our state-of-the-art facilities," Halloway said, gesturing to a massive translucent dome that dominated the central courtyard. "That is the mood dome. It releases subtle pheromones and sonic frequencies to regulate the emotional baseline of the student body. Adolescents can be volatile, especially when the adolescents in question have venom sacs or telekinetic abilities. The dome keeps everyone calm." Mara watched the students drifting beneath the dome. They looked peaceful, but there was a glassy quality to their stares, a slackness in their jaws that looked less like tranquility and more like sedation. "And the corridors?" Mara asked, her voice soft and pleasant. "They seem to shift." Halloway laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, a security feature. "The architecture realigns periodically to prevent unauthorized mapping of the facility. It is for their protection. Of course, everything here is for their protection." They passed a towering pillar of black glass, the housing for the campus security AI. A blue eye pulsing within the depths of the obsidian column tracked them as they walked. "Does the AI record inside the classrooms?" Mara asked. "Only for liability," Halloway said quickly. "But do not bother asking it about the lower levels or the historical archives. It is programmed to politely refuse those questions. We prefer to focus on the future here, Miss Quinn, the past is often messy. He left her at her quarters with a wave of his hand and a keycard that felt heavy in her palm. The room was small, functional, and devoid of personality, exactly the way she liked it. Mara waited until the door hissed shut and the magnetic locks engaged. She stood in the center of the room for a long moment, listening. She heard the hum of the ventilation, the distant thrum of the anti-gravity generators, and the heartbeat of the student in the room next door. She moved to the mirror. Her hand reached up to her neck, finding a seam that was invisible to the naked eye. She pulled. The air shimmered around her face as the biomimic veil dissolved. The human mask faded away, revealing the truth beneath. Her skin was not the pale beige of Mara Quinn, but a luminous pale violet that seemed to catch the light and hold it. Subtle, iridescent markings traced the line of her jaw and vanished down her neck, glowing faintly in the dim room. Her eyes shifted from brown to a piercing, starry silver. She was Lyra Voss, and she was a long way from home. Lyra exhaled, a sound that carried the weight of a decade of running. She stripped off the beige uniform, revealing a frame that was wiry and dense with muscle. She moved to the center of the cramped room and began to move. It was not exercise, it was a language. She flowed through the forms of the silent tide, a martial order that the history books claimed had been extinct for 20 years. Her movements were precise, restrained, and terrifyingly graceful. She moved like water that had remembered how to be ice. A kick stopped a millimeter from the wall. A strike sliced the air with a sound like tearing silk. She was sharpening herself. A chime from her datapad broke the silence. She tapped the screen, and a cascade of static resolved into a string of numbers. It was a dead drop, a message from a mentor who had been killed 3 years ago, routed through a dozen bouncing servers to reach her now. The text was simple. The Academy is a key. Find the chalk vault before the Regent's faction does. Lyra memorized the message, then deleted it. She touched the control on her neck, and the biomimic veil washed over her again. The violet skin vanished, the silver eyes dulled to brown. Mara Quinn adjusted her glasses and prepared for her first day of school. The classroom for interstellar history was a tiered amphitheater designed to accommodate species ranging from 3 feet to 8 feet tall. The lighting was expensive, the desks were hovering platforms, and the atmosphere was thick with the smell of privilege. When Mara walked in, the noise did not stop. The students of Astrelyceum did not fear teachers. Why would they? Their parents owned the planets the teachers came from. Mara walked to the podium, placing her physical paperwork down with a deliberate thud. She scanned the room. In the back row sat a massive reptilian boy with scales the color of dried blood. This was Vrax, the heir to a mining conglomerate that employed slave labor in 3 sectors. He had his feet up on the desk, his claws digging into the expensive polymer. Beside him hovered a small, spherical drone, its lens fixed on the front of the room, a recording device. He was broadcasting this to his friends, perhaps even to the public networks. He wanted a show. To the left, separated from the others by a wide gap of empty seats, sat a girl. She was humanoid, with skin like polished onyx and hair that floated as if she were underwater. She was beautiful, but she held herself with the practiced invisibility of someone who expects to be hurt. Her eyes were downcast, but Mara saw them flick up, sharp and intelligent, analyzing the threat level of the new teacher. Mara cleared her throat. "Good morning," she said. "I am Ms. Quinn. Please take your seats." Vrax laughed. It was a wet, guttural sound. "A human," he announced, his voice booming. "My father keeps humans. They make excellent gardeners. Tell me, Ms. Quinn, do you know how to prune a firethorn hedge? The class tittered. The recording drone zoomed in on Mara's face, hungry for a reaction. Mara did not flinch. She did not blush. She smiled, a small, tired expression that suggested she had heard better insults from toddlers. I am sure your father values his garden immensely. Vrax, Mara said, her voice projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. But we are here to discuss history. Specifically, the history of empires that fell because they mistook wealth for competence. The laughter in the room sputtered and died. The girl with the onyx skin looked up, her eyes widening slightly. Vrax narrowed his eyes. He slowly took his feet off the desk. You think you are funny, human? I think I am your teacher, Mara said, turning to the holographic board. And I think you are currently failing participation. For the next hour, Mara taught, she used humor to diffuse tension and patience to weather the interruptions. When a student threw a digipen at her back, she caught it without turning around and continued her lecture on the Treaty of Three Suns. When Vrax made a crude joke about human fragility, she turned it into a lesson on biological adaptation, making the class laugh with him, then at him, until his control over the room began to fracture. She was good. She was disarming. She was warm. But Vrax was not used to losing. As the bell chimed for the break, Mara began to gather her papers. The students filed out, but Vrax and two of his cronies, a pair of heavy-set muscular aliens with 4 arms each, stayed behind. They moved to block the exit. The drone hovered closer, its red recording light blinking rapidly. We have a tradition for new teachers. Vrax rumbled, stepping into Mara's personal space. He towered over her, 7 feet of muscle and scales. We like to test their reflexes, see if they are quick enough to survive us. Mara looked up at him. She adjusted her glasses. Vrax, she said, her voice reasonable and calm. I strongly suggest you go to lunch. You are shaking, Vrax sneered. Look at the camera. The human is shaking. Mara was not shaking. She was vibrating with a stillness so profound it felt like motion. She was calculating the structural integrity of his knee joint. She was measuring the distance to his carotid artery. She was breathing. I am asking you to step aside, Mara said. Unmake me, Vrax said. Then, he did it. He decided to create a viral moment. He pulled his hand back, a massive clawed appendage the size of a dinner plate, and swung. The slap was intended to knock her across the room. It was intended to humiliate her, to break her jaw and her spirit in one motion, captured in high definition for the galaxy to enjoy. The sound of the impact was sharp, a crack that cut through the air like a whip. But Mara did not fly across the room. She did not fall. Her head snapped to the side, her glasses sliding down her nose. A single lock of hair fell across her face. The room went dead silent. The students who had been lingering in the hallway froze. The girl with the onyx skin stood by the door, her hand over her mouth. Vrax grinned, waiting for the tears, waiting for the begging. Mara slowly pushed her glasses back up her nose. She turned her head back to face him. Her eyes were not filled with tears. They were not filled with fear. They had changed. The brown contact lenses seemed to vanish in the intensity of the stare beneath them. They were soft, terrifyingly soft, like the eye of a hurricane before the house gets torn apart. She looked at Vrax, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You just made this a lesson you will remember, she said. Vrax roared and swung again, a closed fist this time, aiming for her temple. Mara vanished. She did not teleport. She simply moved where he was not. She pivoted on her heel, a movement so crisp it blurred the air. As Vrax's fist occupied the space where her head had been, she reached out. She did not strike him. She did not punch. She simply caught his wrist with one hand and tapped his elbow with the other. It was a redirect, a technique from the silent tide called the falling leaf. She used his own momentum, guiding his massive bulk into a spin. In the same breath, the two four-armed cronies lunged. Mara ducked, a fluid drop that brought her under their guard. She swept a leg out, not a kick, but a hook, and caught the first attacker's ankle. He went down hard. The second attacker swung all four arms. Mara wove through the limbs like smoke through a grate. She placed a single finger on a nerve cluster at the base of his neck and pressed. He collapsed instantly, his legs turning to jelly. Vrax, recovering from his spin, charged her with a howl of rage. Mara stood her ground. She waited until he was a foot away, then stepped inside his guard. She placed her palm against his chest and pushed. It looked like a gentle shove, but it was a kinetic pulse, driving force through his center of gravity. Vrax was lifted off his feet. He flew backward, crashing into the holographic board and sliding down to the floor, breathless, stunned, and pinned by nothing but his own shock. The entire exchange had taken 4 seconds. Mara stood in the center of the carnage, her uniform unruffled, her breathing unchanged. She reached out and plucked the recording drone from the air. She looked into the lens, her face calm and unreadable. "Class dismissed," she said. She crushed the drone in her hand. The hallway erupted. Students were screaming, laughing, whispering in frantic hushed tones. The footage from the drone before she crushed it was already hitting the local networks. Vrax groaned on the floor, his reputation shattering around him. 10 minutes later, Mara was in the administrator's office. Holloway was pacing, his face a mottled purple. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Holloway screeched. "That is Vrax's son. Do you know how much funding his family provides? This is a diplomatic nightmare. Assault charges, lawsuits. They could have you deported or incinerated." "It was self-defense," Mara said calmly. "The video will corroborate that." "Politics does not care about video," Holloway shouted. "Politics cares about leverage." The door to the office slid open, and the room went quiet. A man stepped in. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray uniform with no insignia, only a small silver pin on his collar denoting council oversight. He had dark hair, a scar running through his left eyebrow, and eyes that were the color of cold steel. He moved with the prowling grace of a predator who knows he is the apex. This was the security attaché. He looked at Holloway, and the administrator immediately stopped shouting and shrank back behind his desk. Then, the man looked at Mara. He studied her for a long, uncomfortable minute. He looked at her hands, still dusty from the crushed drone. He looked at her posture, which was too perfect for a civilian. "Leave us." "Holloway," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly. Holloway scurried out of his own office without a word. The man walked around Mara, circling her slowly. "I watched the footage," he said. "And?" Mara asked, keeping her eyes forward. "And," he said, coming to a stop in front of her. "Civilians do not move like that. Where did a substitute teacher from the Outer Rim learn a wrist lock that requires 3 years of academy training to master?" "I grew up in a rough neighborhood," Mara said. The man stepped closer. He was encroaching on her space, testing her, trying to make her flinch. Mara did not retreat. She tilted her chin up, meeting his gaze. "I am Agent Kalen," he said, "and I am responsible for the safety of this academy. You are reckless. Ms. Quinn, you humiliated a warlord's son. You have put a target on your back the size of a moon." "Someone needed to teach him manners," Mara said. Kalen narrowed his eyes. You are dangerous. I do not like dangerous things I cannot control. Then you should try harder to control me, she said softly. The air between them crackled. It was a challenge, a dare. Kalen leaned in, his face inches from hers. He smelled of rain and ozone. For a second, neither of them moved. It was a pause charged with suspicion and a sudden sharp spike of fascination. A small maintenance drone drifted into the room, beeped cheerfully, and projected a holographic translation of the conversation it had just recorded in the hallway. Translation: the male wishes to engage in courtship rituals with the female, the drone announced in a flat mechanical voice. The tension snapped. Kalen jerked back, looking at the drone in horror. Mara let out a short, startled laugh. I believe your equipment is malfunctioning. Agent, she said, a smirk touching her lips. Kalen glared at the drone. Get out. He growled at the machine. It beeped sadly and floated away. He looked back at Mara, composing himself. This is not over. Quinn, watch your step. The corridors here have blind spots, and accidents happen. I will keep that in mind, she said. Mara left the office, her heart beating slightly faster than her meditative rhythm allowed. She walked back to her empty classroom to collect her things. The room was quiet now, the holographic board flickering. As she picked up her datapad, she noticed a thin, physical slate tucked underneath it. She glanced around. The room was empty. She picked up the slate. It was old tech, untraceable. Written on it in elegant, hurried script were 7 words. They do not slap teachers unless they have been promised protection. Mara frowned. The girl, the quiet one with the onyx skin. She slid the slate into her pocket. As she turned to leave, her boots scuffed against the floor near the podium. The impact sounded wrong, hollow. Mara knelt. She ran her fingers over the floor tiles. There, barely visible under layers of wax and polish, was an indentation. She pulled a small multi-tool from her belt and scraped away the top layer of the school insignia that had been painted on the floor. Underneath the gold paint of the Astrelyceum, carved deep into the synthetic stone, was a symbol. It was a lotus flower wrapped in iron chains, the crest of the silent tide, her order. Mara's breath hitched. This was not just a school. This building, this monument to the council's power, was built on top of the grave of her people, and someone had tried to paint over it. She stood up, the sounds of the academy filtering in from the hallway. Laughter, footsteps, the hum of the mood dome. But to Mara, the noise sounded different now. It sounded like the rattle of a cage. She adjusted her glasses, checked the exit, and walked out into the light. The lesson had just begun. The politics of Astrelyceum were not written in the student handbook. They were etched into the architecture itself, invisible lines of influence that dictated who walked in the center of the corridor and who hugged the walls. Lyra Voss, currently wearing the skin and beige uniform of Mara Quinn, spent her first week mapping these invisible territories. She learned that the Department of Xenobiology was entirely funded by the Krell Syndicate, which explained why the dissection specimens were always political dissidents from the Outer Rim. She learned that the physics wing was a tax haven for the Archduke of Io. And she learned that the campus security AI, a terrifyingly omniscient presence named Argus, had specific blind zones. These blind zones were not errors. They were features. They clustered around the historical archives and the private docking bays of the high-born students. It was a deliberate darkness, purchased with credits and influence, allowing the children of the elite to smuggle contraband, bully inferiors, or disappear without a digital footprint. Lyra sat in the faculty lounge, sipping lukewarm nutrient tea, her datapad propped open. To the casual observer, she was grading papers. In reality, she was layering the Academy's blueprints over the structural schematics she had recovered from her mentor's dead drop. There was a discrepancy. The Academy's foundations were too deep. The energy draw from the main reactor was 30% higher than what was required for lights, gravity, and the mood dome. Something was eating power beneath the school, something massive and hungry. Her investigation was interrupted by the chime of a news feed on the wall screen. The screen, usually reserved for bland announcements about cafeteria menus, flared into a high-contrast alert. The council seal rotated in gold, followed by the headline, "Human Aggression on the Rise?" Lyra watched, her face impassive, as a video began to play. It was the incident in her classroom, but it was not the truth. The footage had been surgically edited. The frame rate had been manipulated to speed up her movements, making her look twitchy and predatory. The audio had been stripped of Vrax's threats and the sound of his slap. Instead, it showed Vrax standing peacefully, hands open, followed by a jump cut of Mara Quinn striking him, breaking his arm, and crushing a drone with a snarl that had been digitally added to her face. The commentary track was a smooth, concerned voice. "Parents are asking if unvetted human refugees are fit to teach our children." This shocking footage from the prestigious Astra Lyceum shows a new instructor brutally assaulting a student during a disagreement. Is this the heritage of violence we want to import to Vera Prime? The lounge went quiet. Two other teachers, an avian scholar and a silicon-based math professor, turned their heads to look at her. Their eyes were cold. Lyra took a sip of her tea. She did not tremble. She did not defend herself. She simply noted the time of the broadcast and the production codes embedded in the signal. This was high-level propaganda. Vrax and his friends had not just complained to their parents. They had activated a media machine. They were using soft power. They wanted to see if she would break under the weight of public perception before they had to risk fighting her physically again. Lyra set her cup down. "Interesting editing," she said to the room at large. "They missed the part where he tried to take my head off." The avian scholar ruffled his feathers. "Perception is reality, Ms. Quinn. You would do well to remember that." "I intend to," Lyra said. "In fact, I think I just found my lesson plan for tomorrow." The classroom was tense the next morning. Vrax sat in the back, his arm in a regenerative sling that was likely unnecessary but theatrical. He smirked as Mara entered, expecting an apology, a resignation, or at least fear. The beautiful girl with the onyx skin, Ilara, sat in her usual isolation. She looked at Mara with a mixture of pity and warning. She knew how this worked. The teacher would be shamed, then fired, then erased. Mara walked to the center of the room. She did not bring up the hologram of history dates. Instead, she tapped the console, and the propaganda video from the newsfeed appeared in the air, massive and looping. The class murmured. Vrax laughed, a low rumble, watching your own highlight reel. "Human?" he called out. Mara paused the video on a freeze frame of her face, digitally distorted to look monstrous. "Today," she said, her voice crisp, "we are discussing the history of truth, or rather, the manufacturing of it." She tapped the console again. The raw footage, recorded by the security sensors she had hacked the night before, appeared side by side with the news clip. On the left, Vrax threatened her. On the right, he was a victim. On the left, the slap cracked like a gunshot. On the right, it never happened. She began to dissect the footage like a surgeon. "Notice the timestamp jump at frame 400, Mara said, using a laser pointer to circle the glitch. They removed 1.2 seconds of action to make my reaction appear unprovoked. Look at the lighting here. They added a subtle red filter to the human subject to subconsciously trigger a danger response in the viewer. The room went silent. The students, raised on media feeds, were suddenly seeing the strings of the puppet show. Mara turned to Vrax. "This is sloppy work." "Vrax," she said, not unkindly. "If you are going to frame someone, render the shadows correctly. The light source in your edit comes from 2 different directions. It is physically impossible." Vrax's smirk faltered. He sat up straighter. "It is not a lie," he shouted. "You attacked me." Mara unpaused the raw footage. The slap played. The redirect played. The class watched, eyes wide, as the truth unfolded in undeniable clarity. "The media tells you a story," Mara said, addressing the room, ignoring Vrax. "It tells you who to fear. It tells you who is weak and who is strong. But a story is just a sequence of edits. If you cannot see the cuts, you are not the audience. You are the product." She looked at the quieter students, the ones who sat on the edges, the ones who did not have warlords for fathers. She saw a spark in their eyes. For the first time, someone was showing them how the trick was done. Alara was leaning forward, her dark eyes burning. She was not just watching. She was learning. Vrax slammed his good hand on the desk. "This is illegal. You cannot show unauthorized security feeds." Mara smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had just eaten the hunter's bait and enjoyed it. "I am the teacher, Vrax. I decide what is on the syllabus. And right now, the syllabus is critical thinking. Sit down." For a moment, Vrax looked ready to charge, but he looked around the room. He saw the doubt in his classmates' faces. He saw the laughter bubbling behind their hands. He had lost control of the narrative. He sat down. The victory in the classroom felt good. But Lyra knew it was temporary. She had embarrassed a powerful faction. Retaliation would escalate. She was walking toward the faculty transport bay that evening when a shadow detached itself from a pillar. Agent Kalen stepped into her path. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his steel-gray eyes, but his uniform was immaculate. He blocked her way without touching her, a wall of disciplined authority. "That was a dangerous stunt, Quinn," he said. His voice was low, vibrating through the quiet corridor. "I thought it was educational," Lyra replied, stopping just inside his personal space. "You hacked the internal security grid to get that raw footage," Kalen said. "That is a felony. I should arrest you right now." "But you won't," Lyra said. Kalen tilted his head. "Why? Because you think I like you? Because you watched the raw footage," Lyra said. "You saw what happened. You know I am not the aggressor here. And despite the badge and the terrifying reputation, I think you actually care about justice. Or maybe just order. Either way. Vrax is the chaos agent, not me." Kalen stepped closer. The air between them grew heavy, charged with the static of 2 high-voltage lines running too close together. "Stop deflecting," he said softly. "I want to know where you learned to move. I ran your file. Mara, it is clean. Too clean. It smells like fresh ink. You are not a school teacher." Lyra looked up at him. She could smell the soap on his skin, the metallic tang of the weapon holstered at his hip. She felt a dangerous urge to tell him the truth, just to see if he could handle it. "I took a self-defense seminar," she lied, offering him a half-smile that was playful and sharp. It came with a free water bottle. Kalen stared at her. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then snapped back to her eyes. He was frustrated, suspicious, and undeniably drawn to her. It was a dynamic that was becoming addictive. He was a man who lived by rules. She was a woman who existed in the spaces between them. "One day," Kalen said, his voice raspy, "you are going to slip, and I will be there to catch you. Is that a threat, agent, or a promise?" Kalen held her gaze for a second longer than was professional. Then he stepped back, the loss of proximity leaving a cold space in the air. "Go home. Quinn, before I change my mind about the arrest." Lyra walked away, feeling his eyes on her back like a physical touch. She did not look back. If she had, she might have seen the conflict in his face, the war between his duty and the sudden, terrifying realization that he wanted her to get away with it. The alliance began quietly. The next day, during lunch, Ilara sat at Lyra's table. The girl did not ask for permission. She simply placed her tray down and began to eat with precise, mechanical motions. "They are saying you are a spy," Ilara said, not looking up. "Who are they?" Lyra asked. "Everyone. The group chats are on fire. Vrax is telling people you are an insurgent from the Outer Rim sent to radicalize us." Lyra chuckled. "Radicalize you to do what? Do your homework?" Ilara looked up. Her eyes were pools of black ink, swirling with intelligence. "To fight back," she whispered. Lyra paused. She looked at the girl, really looked at her. Beneath the fear, there was a spine of steel waiting to be forged. "And do you want to fight back, Ilara?" Ilara looked at the table. "I just want to survive, but I am realizing that shrinking does not make me smaller to them. It just makes me easier to step on." Lyra nodded. "Survival is not passive. Ilara, it is an act of aggression against a universe that wants you dead." Ilara slid a small data chip across the table. "What is this?" Lyra asked. "Rumors," Ilara said. "I hear things. People ignore me. I am part of the furniture. There is talk about the mood dome. Some of the older students, they are changing. They go in angry, and they come out empty. Smooth. Smooth? Like a stone in a river," Ilara said. "All the rough edges are gone, but the edges are the parts that make them who they are." Lyra took the chip. "Thank you. Be careful. Ms. Quinn," Ilara said, standing up. "They do not like edges here. They grind them down." The warning proved prescient 2 days later. It happened during the mid-morning transition. The Great Hall was crowded with students moving between classes. Lyra was monitoring the flow, standing near the entrance to the mood dome. A student walked out of the dome. It was a girl Lyra recognized, a fiery, outspoken art student named Jax who had organized protests about cafeteria quality the week before. Jax was walking strangely. Her steps were perfectly rhythmic, her arms swinging in exact sync. Her eyes were wide and unblinking. "Jax," Lyra called out, stepping forward. The girl stopped. She turned her head mechanically. "Greetings, entity," Jax said. Her voice was wrong. It was flat, devoid of inflection, and overlaid with a subtle digital harmonic. "The curriculum is optimal. Compliance is joy." Lyra froze. That was not a teenage girl's voice. That was a playback. "Jax, are you okay?" Lyra reached out to steady her. Jax's body convulsed. Her head snapped back, and she let out a sound that was not a scream. It was a burst of binary code, high-pitched and screeching, tearing from her throat like vomit. "Curriculum integrity failure." The girl shrieked, re-indexing emotional parameters. She collapsed. Chaos erupted. Students screamed. Med drones descended from the ceiling. Lyra knelt beside the girl, checking her pulse. It was racing, hammering against her skin like a trapped bird. But beneath the skin, Lyra felt something else, a subtle vibration, the hum of a subcutaneous implant overclocking. Mind tech. Administrator Holloway appeared, flanked by security guards. "Back! Everyone back!" Holloway shouted, sweating profusely. Just a seizure, a reaction to the humidity, nothing to see. He looked at Lyra, his eyes pleading and terrified. Leave her. Ms. Quinn. The medical team has this. Lyra stood up, her hands stained with the girl's sweat. She watched them load Jax onto a stretcher. The girl was limp now, her eyes rolled back. Compliance is joy, Lyra thought, the words chilling her blood. They weren't just sedating the students, then they were rewriting them. That night, Mara Quinn ceased to exist. Lyra Voss took over. She moved through the maintenance shafts above the ceiling panels, her violet skin blending with the shadows. She wore a skin-tight stealth suit that dampened her thermal signature. She was hunting for the source of the signal she had felt in Jax's body. The schematics she had studied showed a void space behind the Mood Dome's ventilation array. It was labeled HVAC overflow, but the power draw was massive. Lyra dropped silently into a service corridor. The air here smelled of ozone and antiseptic. She moved like smoke, avoiding the sweeping lasers of the security sensors. She found a terminal embedded in the wall. It was hard-lined, cut off from the wireless grid. She jacked in her decoder. The screen flickered. Project, Smooth Stone. Objective, empathy suppression and behavioral standardization. Targets, future council leadership. Lyra felt bile rise in her throat. It was a factory. They were taking the children of the elite, the ones who would one day rule the galaxy, and surgically removing their conscience. They were building a generation of sociopaths who would follow orders without question. And the bullies? Vrax and his kind? They were the stress test. The system encouraged their cruelty to see which victims would break and which would resist. The resistors were then flagged for re-indexing. Lyra downloaded the file. Suddenly, the corridor lights turned red. A siren wailed. Intruder alert. Sector 4. Lyra cursed. She yanked the drive and ran. She sprinted down the corridor, hearing the mechanical chittering of hunter drones behind her. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a solid chest. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm wrapped around her waist, dragging her backward into a narrow observation closet. She reacted instinctively, an elbow driving back, but the arm blocked it with iron rigidity. Quiet, a voice hissed in her ear. It was Kaylin. The closet door slid shut just as a swarm of drones buzzed past, their scanners sweeping the hallway with green lasers. Lyra and Kaylin were pressed together in the dark. The space was impossibly small. Her back was against his chest, his arm still locked around her waist. She could feel the rapid thud of his heart against her shoulder blades. She stopped fighting. She felt him exhale, his breath stirring the hair at the nape of her neck. "You are insane," Kaylin whispered, his voice rough. "What are you doing in a restricted sublevel?" Lyra turned in his arms, facing him. It was too dark to see clearly, but she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Asking the questions you are too afraid to ask," she whispered back. "I am trying to keep you alive." "Quinn, do you have any idea what happens to people who snoop down here? They get re-indexed," she challenged, "like Jax?" Kaylin went stiff. He knew, or he suspected. His hand was still on her waist. He didn't move it. In the darkness, the dynamic shifted. The adrenaline of the chase mixed with something sharper, deeper. Lyra felt a pull, a magnetic gravity that had nothing to do with the mission. She realized how close his mouth was to hers. She could close the gap. It would be easy. It would be a disaster. His hand tightened slightly on her hip. It was a question. Lyra's breath hitched. Her body wanted to lean in. She wanted to melt the ice in his voice. "Not now," she whispered. It was not a rejection. It was a command, a delay. Kaylin let out a shuddering breath. He pulled his hand back as if burned. He stepped back, hitting the wall of the closet. "Right," he croaked. "Not now." The drone sounds faded. Kalen opened the door a crack. "Clear," he said. "Go. Take the West Service ladder. It dumps you out near the faculty dorms." "You're letting me go?" Lyra asked. "I didn't see you," Kalen said, staring into the dark corridor. "I was never here." "But Quinn?" Lyra paused. "If you find proof," he said, his voice barely audible. "Don't die with it." Lyra slipped away into the shadows. The next day, the atmosphere at the academy was brittle. The students were on edge. The rumor mill about Jax was spinning wild tales of alien viruses and brainworms. Lyra decided it was time to change the venue. "We are going on a field trip," she announced. She took the class to the simulation chamber. It was a massive hangar where holographic technology could recreate any environment in the galaxy. "Today," Lyra said, standing before the class, "we are going to the ruinscape." The room shimmered and dissolved. The clean white walls of the academy were replaced by a devastated city. Crumbling skyscrapers leaned like broken teeth against a gray, storm-choked sky. Rain, cold, wet, and perfectly simulated, began to fall. Mud squelched under their boots. "This is a survival ethics simulation," Lyra shouted over the sound of wind. "Your objective is to cross this city to the extraction point, but resources are limited. The bridge can only hold half of you. The medical supplies are sufficient for 3 people. You have to decide who survives." Vrax laughed. "Easy. The strong survive. The weak carry the bags." "We shall see," Lyra said. She initiated the program. The students began to move through the ruins. At first, it was a game. Vrax and his crew pushed smaller students into the mud. They hoarded the virtual supplies, but then the lights flickered. The sky turned a sick, bruised purple. The holographic rubble stopped shimmering and became solid, heavy stone. Lyra checked her datapad. The safety protocols were disengaging. Someone was hacking the sim. Vrax, looking at his wrist comp, grinned. "Let's make this interesting." From the shadows of the ruins, creatures emerged. They were supposed to be low-level scavenger bots meant to scare, not harm, but the code had been rewritten. These were massive, quadrupedal beasts with serrated fangs and glowing red eyes. And the safety dampeners, the code that prevented holograms from exerting lethal force, were gone. "Vrax!" Lyra shouted. "Abort! The safeties are down!" Vrax laughed. "That's the point. Teacher, sink or swim." One of the beasts lunged at a student, a small avian boy. The beast's claws tore through the boy's sleeve, drawing real blood. The boy screamed. Panic detonated. This was not a game anymore. The students scattered, screaming as the beasts hunted them. Lyra did not hesitate. She dropped her datapad and sprinted into the chaos. She hit the beast that had attacked the boy, driving a knee into its synthetic ribcage. It felt solid, lethal. She spun, grabbing a rusted rebar from the rubble, a prop-turned weapon, and swung. "Get behind me," she ordered the students. Vrax was laughing, standing on a pile of rubble. But then, a beast twice the size of the others climbed up behind him. It didn't acknowledge his command codes. It roared and swiped. Vrax fell, sliding down the rubble, his leg pinned under a massive slab of concrete. The beast loomed over him, jaws opening. "Help!" Vrax screamed. "It's not stopping, it's not stopping." His friends had fled. The strong were running. Lyra was fighting 2 beasts, using the silent tide forms to deflect their crushing weight. She couldn't reach him. Ilara stood frozen in the mud. She looked at Vrax, the boy who had tormented her, who had called her invisible. She could let him die. No one would blame her. Then, Ilara moved. She didn't run away. She grabbed a discarded flare gun from the supplies. She didn't have Lyra's grace, but she had desperation. She ran toward Vrax. "Hey!" she screamed. "Ugly." She fired the flare. It struck the beast in the snout, exploding in a blinding red flash. The beast recoiled, blinded. Ilara grabbed Vrax's collar. "Get up!" she screamed. "I can't," Vrax sobbed. Lyra was there a second later. She vaulted over the rubble, landing between the beast and the students. The creature shook its head, recovering from the flare, and lunged. Lyra dropped the rebar. She didn't strike. She stepped into the beast's guard, placed her palms on its snout and chest, and channeled every ounce of her strength into a redirect. She used the beast's massive weight against it, flipping it over her shoulder. It crashed into a supporting wall. The wall collapsed, burying the creature in tons of virtual but deadly debris. Silence fell over the ruins. The rain hissed on the hot rubble. Vrax stared up at Ilara. She was panting. Mud streaked across her onyx face. She looked terrified, but she was standing tall. "Why?" Vrax whispered. "Why did you save me?" Ilara looked down at him, her eyes hard. "Because I am not you," she said. Lyra deactivated the simulation manually at the source pillar. The ruins faded, leaving them back in the sterile hangar. But the blood on the avian boy's arm remained. The terror remained. "Class dismissed," Lyra said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. As the students filed out, shaken and silent, Lyra stayed behind to inspect the damage to the emitter array. She needed to know who had given Vrax the codes to override the safeties. She pried open a panel in the wall where the beast had crashed. Behind the panel, the wall of the hangar had cracked, but it wasn't metal behind the plaster, and it was stone, ancient, black stone. Lyra pulled away a piece of the hangar wall. There was a door, a real door, hidden behind the simulation room, sealed for centuries. And carved into the center of the door was a symbol, a circle of stars being devoured by a serpent. Lyra ran her fingers over it. She knew this symbol. It wasn't just the mark of the silent tide, it was the seal of the first keep. The academy wasn't just built on a grave. It was built to keep something in. The door hummed at her touch. The lesson was over. The war was just beginning. The air beneath the Astrelyceum did not smell like a school. It smelled of ozone, wet stone, and something ancient that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Lyra Voss moved through the shadows of the subterranean corridor, her hand trailing along the wall. The rough-hewn rock here was veined with bioluminescent moss, glowing a faint, ghostly blue. It pulsed in rhythm with the low thrum of machinery that vibrated through the soles of her boots. Massive, dormant engines that sat like sleeping beasts beneath the polished marble of the classrooms above. She was not alone. Behind her, a small group of students moved with the exaggerated stealth of teenagers trying to be spies. Ilara was there, her onyx skin blending perfectly with the dark. Beside her was Jax, the art student who had been mind-wiped and recovered, now trembling but determined. And bringing up the rear was a lanky, four-armed boy named Kodo, who was clutching a heavy industrial flashlight as if it were a holy relic. "Kodo," Lyra whispered without turning around. "Turn the light off. We are trying not to be seen." "But Ms. Quinn," Kodo whispered back, his voice cracking, "if I turn it off, I cannot see the scary bioluminescent spiders that definitely live down here. Besides, I am holding the dramatic flashlight. Every expedition needs a dramatic flashlight carrier." "Give it to me," Ilara hissed. "No," Kodo argued. "You will point it at boring things like the floor. I will point it at ominous shadows to build tension." Lyra stopped. She turned, her silver eyes catching the faint blue glow of the moss. She did not smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. If you two do not lower your voices, she said, her tone pitched perfectly between a teacher's scold and a commander's order, I will grade you on your stealth, and currently, you are both failing. The students clamped their mouths shut. Kodo clicked the light off. They moved on. The corridor widened, revealing a massive sealed blast door made of a material that absorbed the light. Stenciled across the metal in faded white paint were words that made no sense in a modern context. Chalk vault. Lyra stared at it. The font was archaic. The metal was pitted with age. What is a chalk vault? Jax asked, hugging her arms. Is it for art supplies? Lyra touched the metal. It was cold enough to burn. It is not for supplies, she said softly. Chalk is an old slang term from the First Era. It refers to the dust left behind when a memory crystal degrades. This is a graveyard. A noise from the tunnel behind them made them freeze. It was the distinct, heavy click of a safety disengaging. Step away from the door, a voice commanded. Agent Kalen stepped out of the shadows. He was not wearing his uniform jacket, only the gray undershirt that clung to his frame, revealing the tension in his shoulders. His weapon was drawn, but it was pointed at the floor. Kalen, Lyra said. She did not raise her hands. She turned to face him, her body relaxing into a defensive posture so subtle it looked like casual standing. I should arrest you, Kalen said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. I should call the administrator. I should have the perimeter drones incinerate this entire corridor. But you haven't, Lyra said. Kalen holstered his weapon with a sharp, angry motion. He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up the perfect military trim. You are making this impossible. Quinn. I am assigned to protect this facility, and you are down here breaking every security protocol in the manual with 3 minors in tow. They are not minors, Lyra said. They are witnesses. Witnesses to what? Kalen demanded. He stepped closer, entering the circle of faint blue light. He looked at the students. Go back to the dorms. Now. The students hesitated. They looked at Lyra. Go. Lyra nodded. Take the service ladder. I will be right behind you. Ilara looked from Lyra to Kalen, her eyes narrowing. She saw the tension between the two adults, a frequency she was just learning to tune into. Don't hurt her, Ilara warned Kalen, her voice surprisingly steady. Kalen looked at the girl, surprised by her defiance. I am the only reason she is not in a cell. Kid. Go. The students scrambled back up the tunnel. When the sound of their footsteps faded, the silence that rushed back in was heavy and thick. Lyra turned back to the blast door. Kalen grabbed her arm. He spun her around, pinning her against the cold metal of the vault. He didn't hurt her, but his grip was desperate. Who are you? He demanded. His face was inches from hers. I ran your biometrics again. I ran a deep core search. Mara Quinn died in a shuttle accident 6 years ago on the rim. You are a ghost. Lyra looked up at him. She could feel the heat of his body, a stark contrast to the cold door at her back. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the duty warring with something much more volatile. I am not Mara Quinn, she admitted quietly. Then who? Tell me the truth, for once. I am Lyra Voss. Kalen froze. The name meant something to him. He stepped back, his eyes widening. Voss, he repeated. The silent tide. The order that was wiped out by the Council for Insurrection 20 years ago. You are supposed to be dead. We are hard to kill, Lyra said. He stared at her, a mixture of betrayal and awe on his face. He was angry because she had lied to him every day since they met. He was obsessed because she was standing here, a living legend from a history book, breathing the same air. "You are here to destroy the school," he said. "No," Lyra said. "I am here to save the students. The council isn't just teaching them. Kaylin, they are harvesting them. They are stripping out their empathy to build perfect soldiers. My order tried to stop this program 2 decades ago. They burned us for it." Kaylin looked at the door marked Chalk Vault. Then he looked back at her. He gripped the doorframe beside her head, his knuckles turning white as he fought the urge to touch her, to shake her, to verify she was real. "If you are right," he said, his voice low, "then you are walking into a fire you cannot survive. The council will send fleets to bury this." "I know," Lyra said. She stepped closer to him. She moved into the space he was trying to keep between them. Her warmth seemed to fog his composure. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. "If you are going to arrest me, Agent, do it now," she murmured. Kaylin looked down at her. His gaze dropped to her lips, then forced itself back up to her eyes. The air between them was electric, a magnetic field pulling 2 opposite poles together. "If you cannot trust me," she whispered, "don't stand this close." Kaylin let out a breath that sounded like a defeat. "Then stop pulling me," he rasped. He pushed off the wall, turning his back on her. He walked a few paces away, putting his hands on his hips, staring into the darkness. "I can't open this door," he said, his voice steadying. "It has a DNA lock. Old tech, pre-council." "I know," Lyra said. "It needs my blood." She didn't try to open it then. She knew the rhythm of the moment. They needed to regroup. She needed him on her side, fully, before they crossed that threshold. "We go back up," she said. "Tomorrow is culture day. If I am not there, the administrator will get suspicious." Kaylin looked over his shoulder at her. His eyes were dark, hungry, and terrified for her. "Be careful, Lyra," he said, using her real name for the first time. It sounded like a prayer. The next morning, the Astra Lyceum was draped in banners of silk and holographic light. It was Culture Day, a mandatory celebration where the diverse species of the galaxy performed their heritage for the amusement of the visiting dignitaries. But the atmosphere was not celebratory. It was predatory. A council inspector had arrived. High Inspector Vane was a tall, slender man with skin like polished porcelain and a smile that never reached his eyes. He walked through the halls praising inclusion while his entourage of armed guards silently noted the names of students who looked too rebellious. Lyra stood in the wings of the great auditorium stage. She wore her plain beige uniform, but she felt the weight of Vane's gaze from the VIP box. Beside her, Holloway was sweating. "The students have prepared a special segment for you, Ms. Quinn," Holloway said, wringing his hands. "A welcome ceremony." Lyra looked at the stage. Vrax and his group were there. They were smiling. The curtains rose. Vrax stepped to the microphone. "Today, we celebrate the primitive cultures of the galaxy, and to demonstrate the quaint traditions of Earth, we have invited our human teacher to participate in a traditional submission dance." The audience laughed. It was a setup, a humiliation ritual disguised as a performance. 2 students brought out a chair. Vrax pointed to it. "Sit, teacher," Vrax commanded. "Show the inspector how humans beg." The crowd went silent. Vrax's father was in the audience. High Inspector Vane leaned forward, sipping his wine. Lyra walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She looked at the chair. Then she looked at Vrax. She did not sit. She walked to the microphone. She adjusted it. Her movement was calm, fluid, and utterly commanding. "Thank you. Vrax," she said. Her voice echoed through the hall. But you have misunderstood the assignment. Culture is not about submission. It is about exchange. She stepped away from the mic and looked at Vrax. Come here. Vrax hesitated. He looked at his friends. He had to maintain his dominance. He swaggered over. You want me to dance? Human? He sneered. I want you to lead, Lyra said. She held out a hand. Vrax, confused but arrogant, grabbed her wrist to twist it. It was a trap. Lyra didn't fight his grip. She accepted it. She stepped into his circle, moving with him. When he pushed, she turned. When he pulled, she entered. In the martial arts of Earth, she said, her voice projecting to the silent room. There is a concept called aiki. It means to blend with energy, not to oppose it. Vrax tried to shove her. Lyra pivoted, guiding his hand past her, causing him to stumble in a circle. It looked like a dance. He snarled and swung a fist. Lyra ducked, flowing under his arm, and gently placed a hand on his back, guiding him upright. Power is not forcing someone to their knees, Lyra said. She was not looking at Vrax anymore. She was looking at the inspector in the VIP box. Power is the ability to stand, and the refusal to make others fall. Vrax was panting. He couldn't touch her. She was water. She was smoke. Every violent impulse he had was turned into a harmless spin, a gentle dip. She ended the exchange by catching his wrist, halting his momentum completely. They stood center stage, Vrax sweating and disoriented, Lyra calm and untouched. She released him. That is the human tradition, Lyra said. We call it civilization. For 3 seconds there was silence. Then, from the back of the room, a single person started clapping. It was Ilara. Then Kodo joined in. Then Jax. Then the quiet kids. Then the teachers. The sound grew, rolling over the auditorium like thunder. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of approval. Vrax stood there, his face burning. He had tried to make her a victim. She had made herself a symbol. Inspector Vane did not clap. He set his wine glass down, the glass cracking in his grip. The backlash was immediate and quiet. An hour later, Kalen was summoned to the inspector's private shuttle. Vane sat in a floating chair, cleaning his fingernails with a laser scalpel. She is a problem. Agent, Vane said without preamble. She is a teacher, Kalen said, standing at attention. She is a spark, Vane corrected. And this academy is full of dry timber. I have looked at your service record. Kalen, you are ambitious. You want a command of your own. A sector governorship, perhaps? Kalen kept his face blank. I serve the council. Good, Vane said. Then bring me her head, or at least, bring me the reason to remove it. Find out what she is hiding. Do this, and you will never have to take orders from a civilian again. Fail, and you will be scrubbing plasma vents on a prison moon. Kalen stiffened. I understand. Meanwhile, in the girls' dormitory, Ilara found her room tossed. Her clothes were shredded. Her data slate was smashed. On her bed sat a message. It was a medical bill for her little brother, who was in a council hospital 3 systems away. The payment status had been changed from approved to denied. Beneath it was a note. Be invisible again, or he dies. Ilara sat on the bed, shaking. She felt the old fear rushing back, the urge to shrink, to hide, to disappear. The door slid open. Lyra stepped in. She saw the room. She saw the note. Lyra sat down beside Ilara. She didn't offer false comfort. She didn't say it would be okay. They know where my brother is, Ilara whispered. I can't fight them. Ms. Quinn, I'm just a student. Lyra put a hand on Ilara's shoulder. The contact was firm, grounding. Ilara, look at me. The girl looked up, tears streaking her onyx face. They are threatening you because you matter, Lyra said. They only blacklist the people they fear. But I don't have any power, Ilara cried. Lyra looked around the destroyed room. Power isn't what you can do to others, she said softly. It's what you refuse to do. They want you to betray your conscience to save your comfort. They want you to trade your voice for safety. Lyra took the medical bill. She pulled a small, encrypted drive from her pocket. I have friends in the medical underground, Lyra said. We can move your brother. We can hide him. But only if you are ready to stop running. Ilara wiped her face. She looked at the shredded clothes. She looked at Lyra's silver eyes. I am done running, Ilara said. That night, the heist began for real. The academy was asleep. The corridors were silent, save for the hum of the cleaning drones. Lyra, Kaelin, Ilara, and Kodo stood before the blast door of the chalk vault. Kaelin looked at Lyra. He had made his choice. He had not reported her to Vane. He was standing on the wrong side of the law, and for the first time in his life, it felt like the right side. Are you ready? He asked. Lyra nodded. She pulled a knife from her boot. She sliced her palm, a thin red line appearing on her violet skin. She pressed her hand to the center of the door. The metal groaned. The ancient DNA scanners tasted her blood, recognized the lineage of the silent tide, and the heavy locks disengaged with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung open. They stepped inside. The chalk vault was not a room. It was a cathedral of memory. The walls were lined with thousands of hexagonal slots, most of them empty. The floor was covered in a thick layer of white dust, the chalk. In the center of the room, suspended in a beam of hard light, was a crystal the size of a human torso. It pulsed with a chaotic, jagged rhythm. The artifact. Lyra walked toward it. Her breathing became shallow. She could hear voices in her head, screams, orders, the clash of weapons. It's alive, she whispered. She reached out. Her hand hovered over the crystal. Don't, Kaelin warned, stepping forward. It's unstable. I have to, Lyra said. She touched it. The reaction was instantaneous. A shockwave of light exploded from the crystal, knocking the students back. Lyra did not fly back. She was seized. Her body arched, every muscle locking tight. Her eyes rolled back, glowing with blinding white light. She was not in the room anymore. She was 20 years in the past. She saw the first keep burning. She saw her mentors standing in a circle, chanting the final rites as council dreadnoughts rained fire from the sky. She felt their pain, their terror, and their defiance. She saw the truth. The Astrelyceum was built directly on top of the keep's ruins. The council hadn't just destroyed the order. They had paved over it to harness the ley lines of psychic energy the keep sat upon. They were using the sacred energy of her people to power the mind-wiping machines in the mood dome. The pain was unbearable. It felt like her blood was boiling. Lyra, Kaelin shouted. He didn't care about the radiation. He didn't care about the shockwave. He lunged forward when he grabbed her shoulders. The energy arced into him, burning his hands, but he didn't let go. He grounded her. Look at me, he roared over the sound of the psychic wind. Lyra, come back, Lyra gasped, air rushing into her lungs. She slumped forward, the vision fading, but the knowledge burned into her mind. She fell against him. Kaelin caught her, wrapping his arms around her, holding her up. He was shaking. She was shaking. He looked down at her, his eyes wild with panic. I thought I lost you, he whispered. Lyra didn't pull away. She leaned into him, pressing her face against his chest, listening to the frantic hammer of his heart. She needed his steadiness. She was starving for it. Kaelin. She breathed. It wasn't a question, and it was a confession. He held her tighter, his hand tangling in her hair, pressing her head to him. For a moment, there was no council, no mission, no students watching with wide eyes, just the two of them, surviving the storm. Then, the crystal spoke. It wasn't a voice, it was a broadcast. The artifact, activated by Lyra's touch, began to project a holographic map of the academy into the air. Red lines connected the classrooms to the mood dome, and from the mood dome to the council spire in the city center. A recorded voice, cold and bureaucratic, filled the vault. Directive 77 Alpha. Project compliance is active. Current yield, 80% of student bodies successfully neutralized. Empathy centers eradicated. Obedience protocols installed. The resistance of the silent tide has been terminated. The foundation is secure. The students stared at the hologram in horror. "We aren't students," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "We're livestock." Lyra pulled back from Kalen, though she stayed within the circle of his arms. She looked at the map. "They killed my family to build a factory," Lyra said, her voice turning to ice. "A factory that makes monsters." She looked at Kalen. "The inspector knows," she said. Kalen nodded grimly. "Vane is the project overseer. I saw his signature on the files in the stream." "Then we have to stop him," Lyra said. "How?" Kodo asked, still holding his flashlight like a club. Lyra looked at the crystal. It was still pulsing. "This isn't just a memory," she said. "It's a transmitter. If we can get this to the spire, we can broadcast the truth to the entire planet and start a war," Kalen said. Lyra looked at him. Her silver eyes were blazing. "The war started 20 years ago. Kalen, it's just time we fought back." Suddenly, the vault turned red. Sirens began to scream in the corridor outside. Unauthorized access. The security AI droned. Purge protocols initiated. "They know we're here," Kalen said, drawing his weapon. Lyra stepped away from him, her posture shifting from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. "Good," she said. "I was getting tired of hiding." She turned to the students. "Class is in session," she said. "Today's lesson, revolution." The transition from academy to prison was not gradual. It happened with the slam of a blast shield. Astra Lyceum, once a monument to open skies and golden promises, was now a sealed box. The official announcement blared from every holographic interface on campus, repeating in a loop that was calm, synthetic, and terrifying. Biohazard containment protocols active. A Class 4 pathogen has been detected in the student population. Please remain in your dormitories. Medical drones will assist with sanitization. Compliance is survival. It was a lie, of course. There was no virus. There was only the truth, bleeding up from the chalk vault, and the council's desperate need to strangle it before it could breathe. The corridors were bathed in emergency crimson light. Security drones, once programmed to offer directions and carry books, now hovered at chest height with their safety dampeners disengaged. Their optical sensors cycled from friendly blue to combat red. In the sub-basement laundry facility, hidden behind rows of industrial steam presses, Lyra Voss was building an army. It was a ragtag collection of the terrified and the brave. There were 50 students huddled on the damp floor, avian species molting from stress, silicon-based life forms vibrating with panic, and human teenagers clutching improvised weapons made from cafeteria trays and maintenance piping. Lyra moved among them. She was not offering comfort. She was offering competence. "Listen to me," she said, her voice cutting through the hiss of the steam pipes. "Fear is biological data. It tells you that you are in danger. Do not ignore it. Use it." She stopped in front of a young student who was gripping a metal bar so tight his knuckles were white. You are holding that like a club, Lyra corrected, gently adjusting his grip. It is not a club. It is an extension of your arm. If you swing wild, you lose your balance. If you lose your balance, you die. Short strokes. Aim for joints and sensors. She moved to the next group. They are machines. She told them. They do not hate you. They calculate. If you break their line of sight, they have to reprocess. Movement is life. If you stay still, you are just geometry to be solved. In the corner, the social hierarchy of the school was dissolving. The bullies, the ones who had terrorized the hallways just 3 days ago, were fracturing under the pressure of real violence. Grack, the massive four-armed boy who had once helped pin Lyra's students against lockers, was curled in a ball near the lint traps. Weeping, he was terrified. His size meant nothing against a drone with a plasma cutter. Syl, another of Vrax's circle, was pacing. She looked haunted. She had seen a drone stun a first-year student for walking too slow, and the guilt was eating her alive. But Vrax was gone. He had vanished before the lockdown sealed the blast doors. Lyra checked the perimeter. Ilara was sitting on a crate of detergent, her fingers flying across 3 different data pads. The girl's onyx skin was dull with fatigue, but her eyes were sharp. "Talk to me." "Ilara," Lyra said. "We are losing the narrative," Ilara said without looking up. "The official feed is dominating the planetary networks. They are saying the pathogen causes hallucinations and violent paranoia. They are painting us as rabid animals that need to be put down." "Change the channel," Lyra said. "I am trying," Ilara said. She tapped a final command. "I am bypassing the school's firewall. I am flooding the local student chats with video of the drones attacking us. I am using the hashtags the council uses for Harmony Week. They can't filter it fast enough if I jam the algorithm with their own keywords." Lyra watched the screens. Streams of comments began to appear. Confusion, anger, parents asking why their children weren't answering calls. "You are good at this," Lyra noted. Ilara looked up, a grim smile touching her lips. "I spent 5 years listening to lies. Ms. Quinn, I know how they taste." Suddenly, the service door hissed open. The students flinched, weapons raising. "It's clear," a rough voice called out. Agent Kalen stumbled inside. He looked like he had gone 12 rounds with a trash compactor. His gray uniform was torn at the shoulder, stained with hydraulic fluid and soot. He was holding a data pad in one hand and a severed drone logic core in the other. Lyra was at his side in a second. She didn't touch him, not yet, but she scanned him for injuries with a predator's efficiency. "Report," she said. "I sabotaged the West Sector surveillance grid," Kalen rasped, leaning against a steam press. "Argus is blind in sectors 4 through 8. That buys us 20 minutes before they reroute." He looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, desperate. "They are issuing shoot to disable orders. Lyra, not stun, disable. That means bone-breaking kinetic rounds. They are escalating." Lyra took the logic core from him. "Did they see you?" Kalen shook his head, then winced. "I masked my signature. I logged the breach under Administrator Halloway's access code. Let him explain why his credentials were used to blind his own security system. It will buy us confusion time. He was sacrificing his career, his safety, and his name, piece by piece, to buy them minutes." "We have to move," Lyra announced to the room. "The laundry level is compromised. We are going to the sub-transit tunnels." As the students began to file out, guided by Ilara and the recovered jacks, Lyra hung back. Kalen was checking the charge on his pistol. His hands were shaking just slightly. A tremor of adrenaline crash. Lyra reached out and took the weapon from his hand. She set it on the crate. Hey, she said softly. Kalen looked at her. The mask of the stoic agent crumbled. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push him. They are going to kill us. Lyra, he whispered. Not if we keep moving, she said. A proximity alarm blared on the wall. A drone patrol was sweeping the corridor outside. Hide! Lyra hissed. She grabbed Kalen and shoved him into a narrow maintenance alcove between two humming generators. It was a space meant for tools, not people. They were forced together, chest to chest, legs tangled in the dark. Through the grate, they saw the red lights of the drone sweep past. The hum of the anti-grav motors vibrated in their teeth. Lyra pressed her back against the cool metal of the generator. Kalen was pressed against her. His forearms braced on the wall on either side of her head to keep his weight off her. But the space was too tight. His body was a wall of heat. She could smell him, sweat, ozone, and the sharp, metallic scent of fear. He was looking down at her. In the crimson light filtering through the grate, his eyes were black pits of intensity. The drones lingered outside. They were scanning for heartbeats. Slow your heart, Lyra whispered. I can't, Kalen choked out. Not when you are this close. Lyra felt a jolt go through her, sharper than any blow she had taken in the ring. She looked up at him, the grime on his face, the scar through his eyebrow, the way his mouth was set in a line of painful restraint. He lowered his head. He pressed his forehead against hers. It wasn't a kiss. It was more intimate than that. It was a transfer of weight. He was letting go of the burden just for a second and letting her hold him. Lyra's hands came up. She gripped the collar of his ruined uniform. She didn't pull him closer, there was no space left, but she anchored him. She held him there, tethering him to the moment. I don't know if I survived this, she whispered. The admission tasted like ash. She was the weapon, the protector, the legend. But she was also just a woman in the dark with a man who looked at her like she was the only gravity in the universe. Kalen's breath hitched. His hands tightened on the wall, his knuckles cracking with the effort of not touching her skin, not crossing the final line that would undo them both. Then let me want you while I can. He answered. His voice was raw, a scraped open thing. The heat between them spiked, dangerous and consuming. For a heartbeat, the war outside didn't exist. There was only the pulse in his neck, the rise and fall of her chest against his. She wanted to bridge the gap. She wanted to bury her hands in his hair and forget that they were dying. The drone outside beeped. Sector clear. The red light faded. The reality of the mission crashed back in. They pulled apart. It was a physical wrenching, like tearing a bandage off a fresh wound. Kalen stepped back, his chest heaving. Lyra smoothed her uniform, her hands trembling. The restraint was painful. It left a hollow ache in the center of her chest. But they chose it. They chose the students. They chose the fight. We have a job to do, Lyra said, her voice steady again, though her eyes were dark. Kalen nodded. He picked up his weapon. He didn't look at her. If he looked at her, he wouldn't be able to leave the alcove. Right, he said. Let's go burn this school down. They didn't burn it. They exposed it. The group moved fast, cutting through the infrastructure levels until they reached the administrator's office. It was risky, but Lyra needed the keys to the undercity transport veins, and Holloway was the only one with the physical clearance tokens. They kicked the door in. Holloway was frantically shredding physical files. Holographic data was being purged from his terminal in a waterfall of deleting code. He looked up, squeaking in terror as Kalen leveled his weapon at him. You! Holloway screamed. You traitor! The council will flay you. Shut up, Holloway, Kalen said tiredly. Lyra stepped forward. She slammed her hand down on the shredder, stopping the gears. She picked up a half-destroyed document. It was a ledger. It listed student names. Next to each name was a credit amount and a buyer: the Department of Labor, the Military Science Division, the Regent's Private Guard. You weren't just erasing their empathy, Lyra said, her voice cold. You were selling them. Holloway trembled, backing against his desk. The funding. The academy is expensive. We needed the grants. The council pays a premium for predictable assets. Assets, Lyra repeated. She looked at Ilara, who had followed them in. This is what you are to them. Ilara, not a student. A product, a predictable asset. Ilara stared at Holloway. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She raised her datapad and snapped a photo of the ledger. Uploaded, Ilara said. The parents are seeing it now. Holloway slumped. You have destroyed us. No, Lyra said, ripping the clearance token from his neck. We just turned on the lights. She looked at the artifact, the crystalline core of the chalk vault that Kodo was carrying in a reinforced backpack. It was pulsing faster now, reacting to the proximity of the city's power grid. We have to get this to the Spire, Lyra said. It is the only transmitter strong enough to override the planetary jammer. The Spire? Holloway laughed, a wet, hysterical sound. You will never make it. The Regent has deployed the hunter-killers. Lyra ignored him. She tossed the token to Kalen. Drive, she said. The escape route led them down. Beneath the floating districts and the marble halls lay the true anatomy of Vera Prime, the Undercity. It was a tangle of neon-drenched tunnels, magnetic train rails, and vertical ventilation shafts that dropped for miles into the planetary crust. They burst out of a service hatch onto a maintenance catwalk. The air here was thick with smog and the electric tang of high-speed rail. Below them, magnetic trains blurred past. Streaks of blue and violet light in the darkness. Movement. Lyra barked. Above them, the shadows detached from the ceiling. Hunter-killers. These weren't the clumsy security drones from the school. These were sleek, arachnid machines made of matte black alloy. They moved with silent, skittering speed. Run! Kalen shouted. The students sprinted along the catwalk. Lyra stayed at the rear. 3 hunters dropped in front of her. Their limbs were blades. Lyra didn't have a weapon. She was the weapon. She flowed into the silent tide stance. The first hunter lunged. Lyra didn't block. She pivoted. She caught the machine's forelimb, used its momentum to swing it around and smashed it into the second drone. Metal shrieked. The third drone fired a kinetic bolt. Lyra dropped into a slide, the bolt searing the air where her head had been. She swept the drone's legs, knocking it off balance, then drove her palm into its central sensor eye. She didn't stop to admire the work. She sprinted after the group. The catwalk ended at a mag train platform. A cargo train was approaching, a thundering worm of steel. Jump, Lyra ordered. The students hesitated. The train was moving fast. Jump or die, Kalen roared, firing his pistol at the swarm of drones descending from the ventilation shafts. Kodo jumped first, landing on the flatbed of a cargo car. He rolled, clutching the backpack with the artifact. Jax followed. Ilara jumped, her landing clumsy, but Kodo caught her arm. Kalen grabbed Lyra's hand. Together, they leaped. They hit the metal roof of the train hard. The wind knocked the breath out of them. They were moving at 300 kilometers an hour, tearing through the neon tunnels of the Undercity. The drones pursued. They flew alongside the train, matching its speed. "This is a bad plan," Kodo screamed, clinging to the roof. "It is a terrible plan," Lyra shouted back, kicking a drone that tried to land on the car. "Keep moving forward." The chase became a blur of kinetic storytelling. Lyra fought on the roof of the speeding train. ducking under low-hanging pipes, leaping gaps between cars, and dismantling machines with her bare hands. She used the environment, dodging so a drone slammed into a tunnel support, redirecting a blade limb so it severed a hydraulic line, spraying blinding fluid. But there were too many of them. One drone, larger than the others, latched onto the car where the students were huddled. It raised a weapon arm, targeting Kodo and the artifact. Target lock acquired, the drone announced in a mechanical growl. Terminating, Kodo, panic-stricken, fumbled with his wrist comp. He had been trying to hack the local traffic grid, but his fingers slipped. "I can't stop it," he screamed. He hit a button, his translation unit, customized for teenage social interactions, sent a signal burst directly into the drone's receiver. Suddenly, the drone's red eye turned pink. "Hello. Beautiful." The drone's vocal synthesizer broadcasted in a smooth, velvet voice. "Do you come here often?" The drone froze. Its threat assessment AI crashed, unable to reconcile the kill command with the sudden injection of aggressive flirtation code. Kodo stared at it. "Did I just seduce the killer robot? Shoot it," Lyra yelled. Kalen fired. The drone exploded, tumbling off the train. "Nice work, Casanova," Kalen shouted over the wind. "We need to exit," Lyra called out. "We are approaching the spire foundations." The train screamed around a curve, rising up a magnetic incline toward the surface. Ahead, the massive, glistening needle of the council spire pierced the sky. They bailed from the train as it slowed for the cargo depot, rolling onto the Duracrete platforms of the lower spire district. They were battered, bruised, and exhausted. But they were alive. And they had the artifact. They took shelter in a decommissioned cargo container. The artifact was glowing brightly now, a steady, rhythmic pulse that seemed to sync with Lyra's heartbeat. She touched the crystal. It wasn't just warm, it was hot. "It's ready," she said. "But it's not just a recording." "Kalen." "What do you mean?" Lyra looked at the intricate patterns of light swirling inside the crystal. The Regent doesn't just want to hide the past. He wants to rewrite it. This technology, it touches the mind. It alters memory. The Regent plans to use the Spire's broadcast array to pulse the entire planet. He is going to erase the memory of the Resistance. He is going to make everyone believe the Academy has always been perfect. She looked up, horror dawning on her face. He isn't just killing the truth. He is murdering history. If he uses the artifact, he can edit the collective consciousness of Vera Prime. No one will remember the cruelty. No one will remember the lost students. "We have to get to the broadcast deck," Kalen said. "If we plug it in first, we can broadcast the raw truth before he overwrites it." Lyra nodded. She stood up. Suddenly, the side of the cargo container imploded. A shockwave threw them across the metal floor. Smoke filled the air. Lyra coughed, scrambling to her feet. "Kalen! Ilara!" Silhouette figures stepped through the smoke. Elite guards. They moved with a precision that chilled Lyra to the bone. And leading them was not a soldier. It was Vrax. But he was changed. He wore the black and gold armor of the Regent's private guard. His eyes were cold, clear, and utterly devoid of the messy teenage cruelty he had shown in the classroom. This was professional cruelty. End of the line. "Teacher," Vrax said. His voice was smooth. Kalen tried to raise his gun, but a guard shot him, a stun bolt to the chest. He collapsed, convulsing. "Kalen!" Lyra screamed. She lunged, but two guards caught her with energy nets, pinning her to the wall. The electricity agonized her nerves, locking her muscles. Vrax walked over to the students. Kodo and Jax were cowering. Ilara stood in front of them, defiant. Vrax smiled at Ilara. "You always tried so hard to be invisible," he said softly. He grabbed Alara by the throat. She gasped, clawing at his hand. "Let her go." Lyra strained against the net, her vision blurring. Vrax looked at Lyra. "The Regent sends his regards. He told me to thank you for bringing the artifact to us. We were having trouble locating the key, but you walked it right to the door." He signaled the guards. "Take the artifact. Take the girl. Leave the rest." "Why take her?" Lyra shouted. Vrax smirked. "Because, Ms. Quinn, every broadcast needs a face, and we need a student to tell the world how the treacherous Lyra Voss kidnapped her and forced her to lie." The guards grabbed the backpack with the artifact. They dragged Alara away. She didn't scream. She looked back at Lyra, her eyes terrified but burning with a final message. "Don't stop." Vrax paused at the breach in the wall. "Don't worry, teacher," he said. "We will edit this part out." He threw a small metal sphere into the container. Lyra's eyes widened. A flashbang. "Close your eyes," she screamed. The world went white. When Lyra's vision cleared, ringing silence filled the container. The wall was gone, the artifact was gone, and Alara was gone. Lyra fell to her knees, the energy net deactivating. She crawled over to Kalen. He was unconscious, breathing raggedly. She looked out at the spire, towering above them, a gleaming needle of lies. They had lost the element of surprise. They had lost their leverage. They had lost their friend. Lyra reached down and wiped a smear of blood from her lip. Her hand was steady. Her breath was controlled. The time for teaching was over. She stood up, casting a long shadow against the neon lights of the Undercity. The district of Celestial Harmony did not look like a battlefield. It looked like a dream of heaven constructed by architects who had never known hunger. The gala celebrating Harmony Week was in full swing, a sprawling riot of gold light, floating champagne flutes, and holographic flowers that bloomed and wilted in time with the orchestral music. Lyra Voss walked through the center of it, wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that cost more than the entire annual budget of her home village. She hated it. The silk felt like a cage. The air smelled of expensive perfume and moral rot. "Relax," a voice murmured in her ear. "You look like you are about to snap someone's neck." Lyra adjusted the hidden earpiece, her fingers brushing the diamond stud that concealed the receiver. "I am considering it. Kalen. That man near the fountain has been staring at my neck for 3 minutes. I believe he is calculating how much I would sell for on the exotic labor market. Don't give him the satisfaction of noticing." Kalen replied. His voice was tight, strained. "And if he comes closer, I will break his fingers." Lyra glanced over her shoulder. Kalen was walking 5 paces behind her, dressed in the severe, high-collared charcoal suit of a private security detail. He looked devastatingly sharp, but his jaw was set in a line of granite. He was playing the role of her bodyguard, a role that required him to be invisible and obedient. Neither came naturally to him. They were in the belly of the beast. This gala was hosted at the base of the council spire, the glittering needle that pierced the clouds above them. Somewhere in the upper levels of the spire's medical wing, Alara was being held, and somewhere below them, in the secure vault, Vrax and the Regent's men were preparing the artifact for broadcast. Lyra paused as a waiter drone hovered by with a tray of iridescent cocktails. She took one, not to drink, but to have something to hold that wasn't a weapon. "Ms. Quinn!" a voice boomed. Lyra turned, her expression shifting instantly from predator to prey. She widened her eyes slightly, softened her mouth, and hunched her shoulders just a fraction of an inch. The deadly martial artist vanished. The harmless, overwhelmed human teacher appeared. "Counselor Hearth," Lyra exclaimed, her voice breathless. "What an honor." A rotund man with skin like oiled leather waddled over, flanked by two bored-looking models. Harth was the head of educational funding. He was also the man who had signed the order to cut oxygen supplies to the student dorms last year to save credits. "You clean up nicely for a refugee," Harth said, looking her up and down with a wet, heavy gaze. "I heard about the incident at the school. A shame about the quarantine. But I suppose these things happen when one mixes species so liberally." Lyra forced a smile that hurt her face. "It has been very difficult. Counselor, I am just grateful the Regent allowed me to attend tonight. I hope to petition for more medical supplies." Harth laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Medical supplies? Charming. You humans are always so concerned with survival. It is quaint." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. His hand reached out, aiming to pat her bare arm. It was a gesture of ownership, patronizing and gross. Lyra calculated the angle. If she broke his wrist now, she could use his body as a shield against the two guards by the pillar. It would take 1.4 seconds. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. "Step back." "Sir." Kalen was there. He had moved with a speed that startled even Lyra. He didn't touch the counselor, but he placed his body between Harth and Lyra, a wall of charcoal wool and repressed violence. Harth blinked, offended. "Who is this? Your pet?" "My security detail," Lyra said quickly, placing a hand on Kalen's arm. She felt the muscle beneath the fabric jumping. "He is very thorough. Tell him to learn his place," Harth sneered, "or I will have him decommissioned." Harth turned and waddled away, dismissing them as unworthy of his attention. Lyra kept her hand on Kalen's arm. She squeezed hard. "Kalen," she whispered, "stand down." He looked down at her. His eyes were burning with a dark, possessive fire. "He touched you," he rasped. "He almost touched me," Lyra corrected. "There is a difference. Not to me," he said. The raw honesty of it hit her in the chest. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the jealousy flaring behind his discipline. It wasn't the petty jealousy of a lover who wants to own. It was the desperate, terrifying jealousy of a man who knows he is watching a rare and beautiful thing walk through a room full of people who want to break it. "Focus," Lyra whispered, though her own heart hammered against her ribs. "We are here for Ilara." They moved deeper into the gala, weaving through the crowd of dignitaries and warlords. They were heading for the service elevators in the north wing, the ones that led to the restricted medical suites. As they passed a holographic display of the Regent, Lyra's eyes scanned the floor. The marble was patterned with complex geometric mosaics. "Wait," Kalen hissed. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron hard, stopping her mid-stride. Lyra froze. "What?" "Look at the floor," he said, his voice low. The mosaic pattern changes at the third tile. That is a pressure plate, grav-sensitive. If you step there without a bio key, silent alarms trip in the guard station. Lyra looked down. He was right. The design was subtly flawed, a trap for the unobservant. She looked up at him. Their faces were inches apart. He was still holding her wrist, his thumb pressing against the frantic pulse point on the inside of her arm. "You are good," she murmured. "I told you," Kalen said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I catch things that fall." The air between them crackled, heat flashing like a confession they couldn't say aloud. In the middle of the crowded ballroom, surrounded by enemies, the world narrowed down to the warmth of his hand on her skin. Then, a drone floated by, playing a waltz. The moment broke. Kalen released her wrist, though his fingers lingered for a fraction of a second too long. "We need a key," he said, his voice returning to professional detachment. Lyra looked across the room. She saw a drunken general stumbling toward the elevators, a bio-key card dangling from his belt. "Leave that to me," Lyra said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. Getting the key was easy. A bumped shoulder, a spilled drink, a profuse apology that involved Lyra dusting off the general's coat while her other hand danced at his belt. Getting up the elevator was harder. The lift stopped at the 42nd floor. The doors slid open to reveal not a party, but a sterile white corridor that smelled of antiseptic and ozone. This was the rehabilitation wing. 2 guards stood by the desk. They were not human. They were massive, bioengineered hulks with subdermal armor plating. They turned as Lyra and Kaylin stepped out. "Restricted area." The guard on the left grunted. "Identification." Lyra didn't slow down. She kept walking toward them, her silk dress rustling like dry leaves. "Oh, thank goodness," she cried, channeling the frantic energy of a lost tourist. "I was looking for the powder room, and this elevator just went up, and I think I pressed the wrong button, and my security guard here is useless with directions." The guard blinked, his threat assessment lowering slightly as he processed the confused female archetype. "Ma'am, you need to return to the gala," the guard said, stepping forward to block her path. Lyra stopped 1 foot away from him. She looked up at his chin. "Okay," she said. Her voice dropped an octave. The breathless panic vanished. It was replaced by the cold calm of the silent tide. She moved. It was not a brawl. It was a correction. Lyra stepped inside the guard's reach. She placed one hand on his chest and used her other arm to hook his neck. She didn't use strength. She used leverage. She spun, using his own massive weight to throw him. He hit the wall with a bone-shaking thud. The second guard raised his rifle. Kaylin was already moving, ready. He slid across the polished floor, kicking the guard's knee out. As the guard buckled, Lyra was there. She delivered a precise open palm strike to the nerve cluster at the base of the guard's neck. He dropped like a stone. Lyra stood over them, smoothing the silk of her gown. She hadn't even broken a sweat. "Cinematic," Kaylin noted, holstering his weapon. Lyra checked the first guard's pulse. "Strong. He will have a headache, but he will live." "I am a teacher. Kaylin, I don't fail students unless I have to." They moved down the hall. Room 404. Lyra swiped the stolen keycard. The door hissed open. The sight inside made Lyra's blood turn to ice. It was a beautiful room, filled with soft light and soothing music. In the center sat a comfortable chair. Ilara was strapped to it, but they weren't metal restraints. They were soft, velvet cuffs. A drip line ran into her arm, pumping a clear, glowing blue fluid into her veins. Ilara's eyes were open. They were dilated, enormous pools of black. She was staring at a screen that flashed images of geometric shapes and soothing colors. "Ilara?" Lyra whispered, rushing to her side. She ripped the IV line out of Ilara's arm. A droplet of blue blood welled up. Ilara blinked slowly. She turned her head. Her movement was sluggish, like she was underwater. "Ms. Quinn?" Ilara said. Her voice was thick, slurry. "Is class starting?" Lyra cupped the girl's face. "Ilara, look at me. What did they give you?" "It's quiet," Ilara murmured. A smile drifted onto her face, disconnected from any emotion. "The noise in my head, the fear, it's all smooth now, like a stone." Lyra felt a surge of rage so pure it nearly blinded her. They were chemical lobotomizing her. They were burning out her fear centers, and with them, her capacity for resistance. Kaylin was checking the medical readout. "It's a synaptic dampener," he said, his voice grim. "High dosage. It disconnects the amygdala. If she stays on this for another hour, the effects are permanent. We have to get her out, Lyra said. Can she walk? Kalen unbuckled the straps. He pulled Ilara to her feet. She stumbled, giggling softly. My legs feel like noodles, Ilara said. Ilara, listen to me, Lyra said, gripping the girl's shoulders. The drug is trying to make you forget who you are. It is trying to make you comfortable. Do not be comfortable. Ilara looked at Lyra. The drug was heavy, a warm blanket over her mind. It told her that nothing mattered, that pain was an illusion, that obedience was rest. But beneath the blanket, something sharp remained, a splinter of onyx. I don't want to be smooth, Ilara whispered. Fight it, Lyra commanded. Being brave isn't about not being scared. Ilara, it is about being stubborn. Be stubborn. Ilara closed her eyes. She took a breath. When she opened them, the dilation was still there, but the focus had returned. I am stubborn, she said. Good. Lyra said, now let's go. They turned to leave. The door slid open. Vrax stood there. He was not wearing his school uniform. He was wearing the full ceremonial armor of the Regent's Guard, black plate edged in gold. He held a pulse baton in one hand. Behind him stood 4 elite commandos. Class reunion, Vrax said, smiling. He looked different. The insecurity of the bully was gone, replaced by the terrifying emptiness of the true believer. Lyra pushed Ilara behind her. Kalen stepped up to Lyra's side, his gun drawn. Get out of the way. Vrax, Lyra said. Vrax laughed. He walked into the room, seemingly unconcerned by the gun pointed at his chest. You still don't get it, do you, teacher? You think you infiltrated this party? You were invited. What are you talking about? Kalen demanded. Vrax gestured to the room. The Regent needed a villain. The narrative was becoming stale. Human refugees are a drain on the economy. It's boring. But human martial artist terrorist infiltrates the gala to kidnap a council student. Now that is a story. Lyra went still. The human incidents, the edited footage, the lack of security at the service elevator. I was the bait, Lyra realized. Vrax nodded, and you took it. Hook, line, and sinker. The cameras are rolling. Ms. Quinn, the sensors in this room are broadcasting to the gala downstairs. They are watching the savage human threaten the poor alien student. He tapped his baton against his leg. So, come on, Vrax said. Be the monster we paid for. Kill me. He spread his arms. Kill me, and you prove us right. The humans are violent animals who need to be purged. And if I don't? Lyra asked. Then my men will kill the girl, Vrax said simply. And we will say you used her as a human shield. It was a perfect trap. If she fought, she validated their propaganda, and if she surrendered, they died. Lyra looked at Vrax. She looked at the emptiness in his eyes. He wanted to die. He wanted to be a martyr for his father's cause because he had nothing else inside him. She took a breath. She centered herself. Kalen, Lyra said softly. Take Ilara. When I move, you run. Lyra, Kalen warned. Trust me. Lyra stepped forward, and she let her hands drop to her sides. I am not a monster. Vrax, she said. And I am not a soldier. Vrax sneered. Then what are you? Lyra's eyes flashed silver. I am a teacher, and you are about to fail this class. Vrax roared and charged, swinging the baton for her head. Lyra didn't block. She flowed. She ducked under the swing, moving so fast she blurred. She didn't strike him. She simply dismantled him. She caught his wrist, twisting it to disarm the baton. She swept his leg, dropping him to one knee. As the commandos raised their rifles, Lyra grabbed Vrax by his armor and spun him, using him as a shield. The commandos held fire. They couldn't shoot the Regent's favorite pet. Lyra whispered in Vrax's ear. You want to be a victim? I won't let you. You are going to live, Vrax. You are going to live and remember that you had all the power, and you still lost to a teacher in a dress. She shoved him forward into the commandos. They stumbled, tangling together. Run! Lyra shouted. They sprinted into the corridor. The alarm klaxons began to scream. They fought their way toward the roof. The spire was a labyrinth of corridors, and the artifact's influence was beginning to bleed through the walls. As they ran past the executive suites, the air began to shimmer. Strange phenomena erupted around them. Chalk dust, white and thick, began to fall from the ceiling like snow. But there was no ceiling. It was phasing in and out of existence. Lyra saw flashes of things that weren't there. She saw the corridor covered in vines. She saw it burning. She saw it constructed of glass, alternate timelines. Kaelin shouted, firing at a drone that emerged from a wall. The artifact is destabilizing. The Regent must have turned it on. Lyra felt a pull in her gut. The artifact was calling to her. She could feel its power humming in the marrow of her bones. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. She saw a vision of herself using the artifact. She saw herself wiping the council from existence. She saw Vrax turning to dust. She saw a world where her order had never fallen, where she was safe, where she was happy. All she had to do was seize control of the signal and burn them. Power, the artifact whispered in her mind. Rewrite the pain. Lyra stumbled, putting a hand on the wall to steady herself. The wall felt like flesh. Lyra! Ilara cried, grabbing her arm. Lyra looked at the girl. Ilara was fighting the drug, fighting the fear, holding on to herself with both hands. Power without restraint is just a prettier tyranny. The memory of her mentor's voice cut through the noise. Lyra shook her head, clearing the vision. No, she gasped. We don't erase. We reveal. They burst onto the observation deck. The wind whipped at Lyra's dress. Above them, the spire's antenna array pulsed with a sick, violet light. We need to get to the broadcast node, Lyra yelled over the wind. A blast door slammed shut in front of them, locking them on the narrow catwalk. Drones began to descend from the clouds. They were trapped. They huddled behind a ventilation unit. Kaelin checked his ammo. I have 2 clips left, he said. He looked at the swarm of drones. He looked at Lyra. There was a smear of blood on her cheek. Her hair was wild. She looked terrifying and beautiful and completely out of her depth. And yet she was standing. Why? Kaelin asked suddenly. Lyra looked at him, confused. Why what? Why didn't you kill him? Vrax, you could have ended it. Because then I become him, Lyra said. And if I become him, who teaches the students that they don't have to be? Kaelin stared at her. The noise of the drones faded into the background. That is why, he whispered. What? That is why I fell for you, he said. Lyra froze. The wind whipped her hair across her face. I didn't fall for you because you are dangerous. Lyra, Kaelin said, his voice rough with the truth he had been hiding for weeks. I have known plenty of dangerous women. I fell for you because you have every reason to be a monster. And you choose not to be. Every single time. He reached out. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing the blood from her cheek. You are the most disciplined chaos I have ever seen. Lyra's breath caught. Her heart hammered against her ribs, louder than the alarms. She leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his. Kaelin, she whispered. She moved her hand to his chest, gripping the torn fabric of his shirt. She pulled him closer. He didn't resist. He leaned in. His eyes dropped to her lips. The air between them was so charged it felt like a physical weight. The desire was a desperate, hungry thing, born of survival and admiration and the terrifying knowledge that this might be the last minute of their lives. Their breath mingled. Her fingers grazed the stubble on his jaw. He tilted his head. And then, the world screamed. A massive sonic pulse erupted from the antenna array above them. The catwalk shuddered violently. Kaylin and Lyra were torn apart, thrown back against the railing. "The broadcast!" Ilara screamed, pointing up. The spire's tip was glowing a blinding white. The artifact had been engaged. Lyra scrambled to her feet, looking at the display terminal on the wall. Sequence primed. Memory overwrite in T-3 minutes. Lyra stared at the screen. Her blood ran cold. It's not just a broadcast, she realized. The settings. They are locked. Kaylin pulled himself up beside her. Locked on what? Lyra looked at him, her face pale. The system is primed for total erasure. If I activate the artifact to broadcast the truth, the spire's amplifiers might twist it. She looked up at the glowing antenna. If I do this wrong, Kaylin, I won't just fail to save the school. I might accidentally help the Regent erase the concept of resistance from the entire planet. Forever. Kaylin looked at the swarm of drones descending for the kill. Then he looked at Lyra. Then you better get it right, teacher. Lyra turned to the locked blast door. She raised her fists. Class isn't dismissed yet. The ascent to the council spire was not a climb. It was a collision. Lyra Voss kicked open the blast doors to the 99th floor, her midnight blue gown shredded at the hem, her bare feet gripping the polished obsidian floor. Beside her, Kaylin moved like a shadow cast by a flame, his pistol essentially an extension of his hand. Behind them, the students, Ilara, Kodo, and Jax, carried the weight of the revolution in their breathless lungs and trembling hands. The air inside the spire was pressurized and smelled of ozone and expensive flowers. It was a grotesque contrast to the war raging in the streets below. Through the floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows, the city of Vera Prime was burning. But it was not burning with fire. It was burning with information. The city had become a battlefield of narrative. On the massive, building-sized holographic screens that usually displayed stock prices and weather, two stories fought for dominance. The official council feed showed Lyra's face, distorted and shadowed, terrorist leader Lyra Voss. The caption screamed in blood-red letters. Wanted for the kidnapping of students and the destruction of the cultural gala. Shoot on sight. But underneath that, glitching through the static, was the pirate stream. Kodo and the student resistance in the Undercity had hijacked the lower frequencies. It showed the raw footage from the classroom. It showed the ledger Lyra had found in the administrator's office. It showed Ilara, drugged and strapped to a chair in the rehabilitation suite. She is not a terrorist, the student feed read in jagged, hand-coded text. She is our teacher. We have to keep moving, Kaylin said, his voice rough. He checked the magazine of his weapon. I have 3 rounds left. That will have to be enough, Lyra said. They sprinted down the Hall of Ancestors, a long corridor lined with statues of past counselors. But the security grid was adapting. The floor panels slid open, and automated turrets rose from the ground. Cover! Kaylin roared. He shoved Lyra behind the marble statue of a 4-armed diplomat. Gunfire erupted, chipping the stone. Dust filled the air, white marble dust that looked suspiciously like chalk. Lyra didn't hide. She calculated. 3 turrets, she said, her voice calm amidst the deafening noise. Alternating firing patterns, and there is a 2-second gap in the rhythm. I can take the left one, Kaylin said. You get the rest? Lyra looked at him. His face was smeared with soot, his uniform ruined, but his eyes were steady. He wasn't questioning her impossible math. He was trusting it. On my mark, Lyra said. Mark. Kalen leaned out, firing 2 precise shots. The left turret exploded in a shower of sparks. In the same heartbeat, Lyra moved. She didn't run, she flowed. She slid across the polished floor, the silk of her dress hissing against the stone. She grabbed the barrel of the center turret as it spun to track her. With a torque of her hips that defied physics, she wrenched the mechanism past its rotational limit. Metal shrieked and snapped. She used the broken turret as a vaulting point, launching herself at the third one. She didn't have a weapon, so she became one. She drove her heel into the sensor array of the final machine. It whined and powered down. Clear, Lyra said, standing amidst the smoking wreckage. The students ran past her, eyes wide. You are terrifying, Kodo wheezed as he passed, clutching his datapad. Focus on the door. Kodo, Lyra said. They reached the atrium of the broadcast center. It was a massive open space dominated by a suspended walkway leading to the central transmitter. But the way was blocked. A squadron of elite guards stood in formation, and behind them stood the bullies. It was the final fracture of the social hierarchy. Syl, the girl who had been consumed by guilt, stood near the edge of the platform. She was holding a disruptor rifle, but the barrel was shaking. Grak, the massive reptilian boy, was trying to board an emergency shuttle that was docked at the far end of the atrium. He was shouting at the pilot. Do you know who my father is? Grak screamed, waving a platinum credit chip. Get me off this tower. I have immunity. The pilot, a cold-faced council officer, looked at Grak. Asset liquidation ordered, the pilot said. The shuttle door slammed shut. The engines fired. Grak pounded on the glass, screaming as the shuttle detached and flew away, leaving him stranded on the platform. He turned around, his face slack with shock. He looked at the guards. He looked at Lyra. They left me, Grak whispered. The officer in charge of the guards raised his hand. Clear the platform, he ordered. Remove the loose ends. The guards raised their weapons, not at Lyra, at Grak. Lyra moved before she thought. Get down, she screamed. She sprinted across the gap, tackling Grak just as the plasma bolt seared the air where he had been standing. They skid across the floor, Lyra shielding the massive boy with her own body. Grak looked up at her, his reptilian eyes wide with confusion. You saved me, he stammered. Why? I hate you. Lyra stood up, pulling him to his feet. I know, she said. Go hide. On the other side of the platform, Syl made her choice. She looked at the guards firing at her classmate. She looked at Lyra shielding an enemy. This is wrong, Syl said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. She turned her rifle. She didn't fire at Lyra. She fired at the control panel of the door sealing the broadcast room. The panel sparked and exploded. The blast door ground open. Traitor, the officer screamed, turning his weapon on Syl. Syl dropped the rifle and raised her hands. She looked directly into the lens of a security drone that was broadcasting to the screens outside. I am Syl Vane, she said, her voice shaking but clear. My father is the Minister of Defense, and he is a liar. The feed cut out instantly, but it was too late. The words were out. Vrak stood in the shadows of the doorway. He watched his friends fracture. He watched Grak cower and Syl defy. He watched his own immunity dissolve like sugar in hot water. He looked at his hands. They were empty. He stepped aside. He didn't fight. He didn't help. He just ceased to be an obstacle. Lyra ran past him. She didn't look back. They breached the broadcast core. It was a spherical room lined with banks of humming servers. In the center, a column of pure light rose to the ceiling, The planetary transmitter, the artifact, which Lyra carried in a sling across her back, began to scream. It was not a sound. It was a psychic pressure. The crystal was reacting to the massive energy output of the spire. Strange phenomena began to manifest. The air filled with white dust, swirling like a blizzard. But it wasn't dust. It was memory. Ghostly images began to project into the room. They were three-dimensional, translucent, and heartbreakingly real. A teacher from 20 years ago, begging for her life. A student holding a protest sign that said, "Let us feel." A line of monks from the silent tide, standing in meditation before they were slaughtered. The room was crowded with the dead. Kaelin fired at a guard who charged them, but the bullet passed through the ghost of a weeping child before hitting its target. "This is getting heavy," Kaelin shouted, reloading. Lyra ignored the ghosts. She ran to the central console. She unslung the artifact. "Ilara," Lyra shouted, "I need you on the interface." Ilara slid across the floor, dodging a stray laser blast. She jacked her datapad into the console. "I am in," Ilara yelled, "but the encryption is insane. It is rewriting itself every second." "Keep it open," Lyra ordered. Suddenly, the room went silent. The gunfire stopped. The ghosts froze. A voice filled the chamber. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifyingly reasonable. Lyra Voss. A hologram materialized in the center of the room. It was the Regent. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a smile that looked like it had been carved by a master sculptor. "You have fought bravely," the Regent said. "I admire that. The Silent Tide always did breed excellent warriors." Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing with the resonance of the artifact. "We are not warriors," she said. "We are guardians." "Semantics." The Regent waved a hand. "Look at you. You are tired. You are grieving. You want your life back." The hologram shifted. The ghosts in the room changed. The dead monks stood up. The blood vanished from their robes. They smiled. Lyra saw her own mentor, Master Wren, standing there, whole and alive. "The artifact is powerful," the Regent purred. "It does not just broadcast truth. It edits reality. If you give it to me, Lyra, I can fix this. I can rewrite the timeline. I can bring them back. Your order never falls. You never have to run. You can go home." Lyra stared at the image of Master Wren. He looked so real. She could smell the incense on his robes. All she had to do was surrender. She could erase the pain. She could erase the last 20 years of running and bleeding. "Just hand me the crystal," the Regent whispered, "and I will make the world kind again." Kaelin stepped up beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a solid presence in a world of ghosts. He trusted her to choose. Lyra looked at Master Wren. She looked at the smile on his face. It was a lie. "If you rewrite the past," Lyra said, her voice trembling, "then their sacrifice means nothing." She looked at the Regent. "Pain is not a mistake to be corrected," she said. "It is the cost of living in a world where we are free to choose. I will not fix the past by murdering the future." She raised her hand. She smashed her fist into the holographic emitter. The Regent's image flickered and died. The ghosts of the happy monks vanished, replaced by the swirling, angry dust of the truth. "Kill them." The Regent's voice snarled from the speakers. "Kill them all." The blast doors at the far end of the room hissed open. The Regent's champion stepped out. He was a biomechanical nightmare, a 7-foot-tall cyborg with blades for arms and a suppression field generator embedded in his chest. Kaelin raised his gun. "I'm out of ammo," he said calmly. Lyra stepped in front of him. She took a breath. She centered herself. Then I guess we do this the old-fashioned way, she said. The fight was a blur of motion. The champion was fast, faster than anything organic should be. His blade arms sliced the air, cutting through server banks and railings like paper. Lyra did not meet his force. She flowed around it. Kalen fought with a combat knife and a discarded metal pipe. He wasn't a martial artist, but he was a brawler. He covered Lyra's blind spots. When the champion swung low, Kalen struck high, distracting the cyborg just long enough for Lyra to land a blow. They moved in perfect sync, a duet of violence. Lyra slid under a scything blade, grabbing Kalen's hand to pull herself up. Kalen braced his back against hers, blocking a strike meant for her head. He covers the angles. She flows like water. The champion lunged, his chest generator glowing red. He unleashed a gravity pulse. Lyra and Kalen were thrown backward. They hit the central console hard. Lyra gasped, pain flaring in her ribs. She looked at Kalen. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "We can't beat him with force," Lyra wheezed. "Then we use the environment," Kalen said, spitting blood. Lyra looked at the artifact. It was pulsing violently, reacting to the suppression field of the champion. "The crystal," Lyra said. "It hates him." She grabbed the artifact. It seared her hands, but she didn't let go. "Distract him," Lyra shouted. Kalen didn't hesitate. He charged the 7-foot killing machine with nothing but a pipe and a scream. The champion turned, raising a blade to impale him. Lyra moved. She sprinted up the side of the server bank, launching herself into the air. She didn't strike the champion. She struck the artifact against his chest generator. The reaction was catastrophic. The pure truth of the crystal met the artificial suppression of the cyborg. A feedback loop shrieked through the room. The champion convulsed, his systems overloaded. He fell to his knees, smoke pouring from his joints. Lyra landed in a crouch. The champion looked up at her, his red eyes flickering. "Finish it!" The cyborg's vocal processor clicked. Lyra stood up. She looked at the machine. She raised her hand, edge hardened for a lethal strike. Then she lowered it. "No," she said. She turned her back on him. "You are broken machinery," she said. "You are not worth the stain on my soul." She walked back to the console. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the transmitter and the sparking of the downed cyborg. Lyra placed the artifact into the console's interface slot. It locked into place. The light in the room shifted from red to a blinding, pure white. Ilara's fingers flew across the datapad. "The signal is live!" Ilara shouted. "We are broadcasting in 10 seconds. Lyra looked at Kalen. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, shaking exhaustion. They were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. Kalen holstered his empty weapon. He looked at her. Lyra stepped close to him. She didn't care about the cameras, and she didn't care about the council. She pressed her forehead against his. It was the same gesture as in the maintenance closet, but the context had changed. Then, it was desperation. Now, it was victory. He reached up, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. He didn't kiss her. He breathed her in. "If we live," Lyra whispered, her voice cracking, "you don't get to leave me." Kalen let out a shuddering breath. He closed his eyes. "Then don't die on me," he answered. The words broke like a surrender. 5 seconds, Ilara warned. Lyra pulled back. She looked at Kalen one last time, memorizing his face. Then she turned to the microphone. There was no script. There was no teleprompter. Ilara nodded. "Live." Lyra looked into the camera. Her image was being beamed to every screen on Vera Prime, from the gala hall to the slums of the Undercity. She didn't look like a terrorist. She looked like a woman who had walked through hell and brought the fire back with her. "My name is Lyra Voss," she said. Her voice was calm. I am a teacher at the Astra Lyceum. She touched the artifact. I am not here to tell you a story. I am here to show you what they cut out. She activated the memory core. The broadcast hit the planet like a physical wave. It wasn't a speech. It was a sensory overload. The artifact projected the raw, unedited memories of the last 20 years. The planet saw the mood dome stripping the empathy from their children. They felt the cold numbness of the procedure. They saw the massacre of the silent tide. They felt the terror of the monks. They saw the ledgers. They saw the price tags on the students. It was ugly. It was messy. It was undeniable. In the gala hall, Counselor Harth dropped his champagne glass. The music stopped. The dignitaries stared at the massive screens in horror, seeing their own signatures on the documents of sale. In the streets, the police lowered their weapons. They saw their own children in the footage. The narrative broke. The lie that held the unified council together shattered under the weight of the truth. The upheaval was immediate. Protests didn't just ignite, they exploded. The gala was stormed not by soldiers but by parents. The regent tried to issue a kill order, but his own generals refused to relay it. The chain of command dissolved in the broadcast core. Lyra watched the feed. She saw the city lighting up. "It's over," Ilara whispered. "No," Lyra said, leaning heavily against the console. "It is just beginning." 1 month later, the Astra Lyceum was a ruin. The mood dome was shattered, its glass shards glittering in the sunlight like diamonds. The council had fractured. The regent was in custody, awaiting trial by a tribunal of planetary representatives. Vrax and his father were gone, fled to the outer rim to hide from the consequences of their arrogance. Reforms were promised, but promises were wind. The real work was in the streets, in the committees, in the arguments breaking out on every corner. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was free. Lyra walked through the rubble of her old classroom. She was not wearing the beige uniform. She wore a tunic of deep violet, cut to allow movement. Her skin was visible, luminous and alien. She wore no mask. She found Kalen standing by the remains of the holographic board. He was no longer in uniform. He wore civilian clothes, a jacket and heavy boots. He looked younger, lighter. He held a piece of white chalk in his hand. "You are late, teacher," he said, smiling. "I had a meeting with the new administrator," Lyra said, stepping over a fallen beam. "They want me to run the defense curriculum. Are you going to do it?" Lyra looked at the students gathering in the courtyard. Ilara was there, organizing a supply drop. Jax was painting a mural on the blast wall. Koda was arguing with a drone about poetry. "They don't need a defense curriculum," Lyra said. "They need to know how to build something that lasts." She took the chalk from Kalen's hand. Their fingers brushed, a spark of familiar heat passing between them. He didn't pull away. He leaned against the wall, watching her with that quiet, intense devotion that had kept her alive. Lyra turned to the only wall still standing. It was scarred by laser fire and scorch marks. She raised the chalk. Dust drifted in the air like snow. It settled on her hair, on her shoulders, on the ruins of the prison that had tried to break them. She wrote a single sentence. "No one gets to decide who you become." She dropped the chalk. She turned back to Kalen and her students. "Class is in session," she said.